Today's December 15th, sometimes considered a quiet time in the offseason, but times have changed and the Pirates are on bend time. We're going to talk anyway. You're listening to the Bridge to Buctober podcast. Yins guys, thank you for listening to the Bridge to Buctober podcast, where we talk all about them Pittsburgh Pirates and that. My name is Josh, and I'm alone again. Jake's schedule got changed. He was called in to work late. I think he has to close tonight. So, again, we get an opportunity to give Uncle Jake a hard time. So go ahead. I don't think he'll watch it, but we can anyway. Let's give him a hard time. How we doing today? Very boring weekend, I guess. Basically, we got one deal. We're not the only team. It's quiet and slow. But, it is what it is. We've got some people in the chat today. One of which, Jeff Estep. This is the guy that... all right, we're gonna hit open the card.
My gosh, we have a superfractor.
Jared Jones superfractor that we opened up on Wednesday. We were super excited about it. Got to see Jeff today. Got the card returned to me.
No.
And now we can show it off to you guys. Here you go. If I can get the right angle here. Jared Jones, 1 of 1, superfractor. I know everybody that's upside down. Everybody was asking to see it on last show, so here we are, showing it off now. As you get to see my gimpy hand that I just had surgery on Friday morning. I'm using it all right. Fat fingering a lot when I try to type, which I hadn't tried to really do until today. So, but there you go. Pretty excited about it. It's been a lot of fun. So anyway, we've got a couple of things to talk about. The Pirates did make a move. It is kind of so uneventful in Pirates land that we actually have more to talk about when we're talking about the most exciting thing happened this week was a pulled baseball card and a hand surgery. So, yeah, that's always exciting. But anyway, Pirates did make... I guess we got to talk about the Horwitzer last week, or on Thursday. So at least that was good. But let's see. So Mike's coming in hot here. It's time for Sherrington to take some semi-risk. Bring someone in, either if it's spending some money or the Abreu for Jones deal. If they don't win, he's getting fired. So... Abreu for Jones. Abreu is not even close to enough for Jones. To be honest with you, the way that they're talking about Jones being on the same level as like Garrett Crochet or better. You're gonna Abreu and it's gonna take some more. I could think that it's probably gonna take Casas and somebody else. Well, obviously we wouldn't do that now because we already got the Horwitzer. But I'm thinking, if you're going Jones, which by the way, I don't want you to trade Jared Jones now. We got to get this thing out of here before we do that. Or not out of here or whatever. Jeff's working on that end of things. I wouldn't want to see Jones anywhere right now. You've got the 3. I don't think that that's something that's going to happen. But yeah, as far as like take a risk, it is absolutely time to do something. I think that maybe the Spencer Horwitz deal was risky, but not in the same way that's like an actual investment, right? So I don't know. I just think that's not his way to go, and we're going to be stuck with what we're going to be stuck with. But there have been some moves. We're going to talk about a few of those. The Pirates really just won, but there have been some moves. And we may as well go into it. Bucko Mike's throwing it in here. Valdez was an okay pickup. Rookie year, almost 800 OPS, 103 OPS, I'm guessing plus, 6 homers. So I think that this, Emmanuel Valdez, so the trade was Pirates acquire Emmanuel Valdez from Boston for, wait for it, right-hander Joe Vygotsky, which is a great name. Unfortunately, or fortunately, that's the first time I've ever heard it. Joe Vygotsky. He's going to Boston. I mean, even Ethan Houlihan posted that he had no idea who this guy is, and he knows everybody in the Pirates organization. So I was pretty, I don't know. This is fine. I'm not sure why the McCutchen deal isn't done yet. Why we can just get that one done now. Winter meetings are over. Back home. Thanks. I thought that's what you meant. I mean, let's get the McCutchen deal done. Let's just get some things moving. As some people have pointed out to me recently, I mean, they're going to start selling tickets for the season, right? You need to have at least a little bit of some sort of excitement going into the season. To be honest with you, I haven't had a whole lot of time to look stuff up. I haven't been able to use my hand very much. It's still a little bit, I mean, I had to kind of keep it up a lot of times, but I sat down at my computer for the first time at about 7:30. No, it was actually closer to about 8:15 tonight. I had my laptop out earlier today on the couch, but haven't sat at my computer since then. So that's kind of that's a long time for me not to be sitting in the seat. I'm usually in the seat a lot. So Mike says personally he would keep Jones and Keller. And if the Mets are willing to eat some money on Marte, I would have a reunion with him. I've seen that come around. I just don't know if that's something that the Pirates are going to be doing right now. I wouldn't even think they would have to eat money, to be honest with you. I think you could give up less if you just took on the money. The Pirates need to spend the money. We know they're going to spend the money, and they need to spend it. We've talked about this a couple times. And speaking of, let's look back at Oakland. Jeffrey Springs, the deal there, $10.5 million. I didn't realize when the deal was made it was that many. I think it was Bucko Mike that actually pointed out to me. But like $10.5 million for this guy because the A's have to spend money. They have to, or they lose shared revenue. And so same sort of thing for the Pirates. They're going to have to be, I think, somewhere in the upper 90 million, close to 100. And so they're going to have to be there. So take on all of Marte's money if that's what you're going to do. If you think that Marte's the guy that you want to bring in. I do kind of feel a little bit like if you bring in Marte, you kind of push Billy Cook off the roster. So if that's where you're at, which would be understandable, but if that's where you're at, I think that that's kind of the fit that would be there. I don't know that maybe not. I guess it depends on who else you get, right? They still need to get another outfielder. I don't think he's your everyday guy out there. They need to do better than that, and maybe they won't. So, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things, but I would say eat all the money if you're going to make that deal. Bring it on. Why not? You start to take a look at what this roster is going to look like in the outfield. And we've already said Brian Reynolds probably stays in left field now that you brought in Horwitz for first base. You've got O'Neal Cruz in center field. You only have right field left if you've got Billy Cook, you've got Jack Sawinski, you've got Joshua Palacios. You know what I'm saying? There's some room there. I mean, there's a couple of guys that are on the roster that probably aren't, that shouldn't have a realistic shot at making that spot. But I think if you can start going out, Dave White says they should go after Kepler. That's somebody that's on the list that a lot of people are liking right now. Max Kepler would be a good left-handed piece for right field, maybe even left. I don't know. I've mentioned Jock Peterson. I still like that move. Whoever you get, if he's left-handed, you got to be thinking that that right field left-hander is going to play the majority of the games out there, and you could platoon Billy Cook in there or Nick York in there or X name whoever you want that's a right-handed guy that can play out there. Maybe you bring in somebody else, and he ends up making a spot there. But either way, I mean, maybe that is Marte. But I don't, like I said, that's a lot of money to go to Marte just to be a platoon against left-handed bats. Although you might need two of them, because if Horwitz is going to be platooned, which, by the way, I wouldn't early in the season. I don't think that that's necessary early in the season. I think you give him a shot to play every day. It's worth it to, if you can get something for him. You can get that. You can get that first baseman every day. If it doesn't work out, yes, you're going to have to start putting in Triolo or Brian Reynolds coming into the infield or Billy Cook coming into the infield and playing first base. And if you do that, you're going to need another outfielder. If it's Reynolds or Cook, you're going to need another outfielder to go into that other spot. I would personally bring in Reynolds, play him at first base, give him that time, and then Billy Cook would take over left field and I'd have my platoon in right field still. So I think you could still legitimately get two guys for right field at this point and have, whether it's Max Kepler or Jock Peterson. I mean, the thing is if you get these platoon type players for right field, typically maybe just a tick under what an everyday player would be. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's the ticket. Maybe that's how you get there. Bucko Mike agrees. Says Horwitzer needs reps against lefties just like Cruz did this year. What's up, Mutu? In the chat. I think there was a name one time that you said other than Mutu to call you, and I've already forgotten it. If you want to throw it in there again, or maybe Mutu's good enough. I thought there was a name, though, that you threw out there. But anyway, right field is still number one. I mean, other than the bullpen stuff, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit, but right field's got to be number one for this team right now. That's what they've got to be focusing on. And Ben typically just says, well, winter meetings is the beginning. We've got all kinds of time until all the impact players are gone. You've already gotten rid of 3 pitchers. Cool. Mutu's fine. You've already gotten rid of 3 pitchers. I don't see this team really parting with a ton more pitchers in order to do that, although it does sound like the trade market is the way they're going to go rather than the free agent market. And quite frankly, I just don't understand it. I mean, they've got to spend money. They're going to try to spend money. You know that there's going to be 2 guys on the extension list for this spring, and maybe we'll talk about that. Maybe we won't dive into that right now. Wait till Jake's on here and we'll kind of talk about maybe some players that are potential extension candidates. So save your comps for that. Mutu says Jared Jones for Roman Anthony would be insanely bold. I don't think the White Sox are moving Roman Anthony. Outside of Bubba Chandler, that's where they're at with it. I don't think Roman Anthony is a possibility. I think you're more or less doing what they did. I mean, you saw they got Garrett Crochet without giving up any of those top 3, Anthony, Campbell, and why am I blanking on the last guy? Totally blanking. So I'll move on there. If somebody wants to throw that in there and remind me. But I just don't know if the Red Sox are parting with any of those guys. Maybe one of them, but that would be tops. And you wouldn't get much else if you got to get one of those guys. They're all, Meyer. Yeah, Marcelo Meyer. Watch, I'll see it pop into the chat now because there's that delay, right? But anyway, I think that if they want to focus on this, I don't know if Marte's the guy. I don't know if Marte's a guy even. But it is money. They need to take on money. They need to get that payroll up. And it doesn't mean anything, guys. I'm going to be honest with you. It doesn't mean anything. Money's money. Yes, we always say they need to spend money, they need to get good players in here. But the only part that's really true about that is that they need to get good players on here. And good players cost money. I think that's secondary. You can't just go out and spend money. I mean, the A's are going to do it this year. They're going to spend goofy money. They really are. And they're going to get up over $100 million because they have to, or they risk losing their shared revenue. So they're going to spend some money on some players that might be, well, Luis Severino is a great example, just not a $22.5 million pitcher. He's just not. And that's in the market today. I mean, he's even in today's market, the way that it's high, it's still not that high. And they're going to do that with somebody else because that's how they have to convince people to pitch in a minor league park this year on a team that's, probably putting together a team like that. They're probably also going to shoot for some extensions to get some of the younger guys some extra money, even if it's just option years on their free agency and they just buy out their rookie contract and their arbitration just to give them guaranteed money, just to get their payroll up, just to try to meet that mark. Or they go out and they find a relief pitcher late and they give him a boatload of money, much like the Pirates did with Chapman last year. Although it's hard to say. I mean, Chapman probably was not a $10.5 million pitcher, but he's getting 10.75 this year, and he's probably, right around that, I guess. Bucko Mike says that Randall Grichuk in right field might be the answer. 319 versus lefties, 324 runners in scoring position in 2024. Randall Grichuk could be an answer, actually. If you were able to get like, let's say like a Max Kepler or Jock Peterson, since those are the two that were brought up tonight, it could be a number of guys, really, because when you start opening up into the trade market, there could be some other guys as well. But what if you started looking at a guy like Randall Grichuk to pair with a Jock Peterson? Like, right field's going to be really good at that point, right? I mean, you got to like what that looks like. I feel like that's a good setup there. Mutu says less bold would be to try and acquire Kjerstad, but the Baseball Savant page gives major reasons to be concerned just how legit he is. I will tell my story. I've told it before. I was in Sarasota for the debut of Skeens at spring training, and it was just like the spring breakout game. We started off the game with Skeens and Jackson Holiday, and I remember when we walked into the park, we stood there and watched Heston Kjerstad hit BP, and it was the most impressive round of BP that I've ever seen. Now, I understand there's strikeouts to come along with it. And he's a year older than maybe a Colton Cowser. But, man, that guy can hit. I mean, it was flicking. I'm not kidding you. This was not a full swing. He was flicking balls off the center field batter's eye. It was nuts. And we stood there and we talked to Ryan Ripken right behind home watching him hit. And man, Ripken is huge on him and really thought he was going to break out last year. But I don't know, man. I'm in on Heston Kjerstad. I think sometimes guys are going to be a little bit slower. Power guys especially be a little bit slower to get acclimated. But the problem is he's probably very similar to a Jack Sawinski with a little more hype. Well, a lot more hype and more power maybe even. But you're going to see a lot of the same types of things, maybe high strikeouts for a few years. And you know what I'm saying? So like you're going to see, there you go. Dave White brings up the same guy. So you know what I mean? Like that. And I still think Jack can be, to be honest with you. I mean, he's got to show it first, and you can't go into spring training thinking it's going to be Jack because we have to see something better than what we saw last year. You know that I'm a Jack fan. You know I'm a Sawinski fan, and I'd love to see that guy do well. I think he's important. His type of hitting is important for this lineup. You need power. There's not a lot of it, especially after you get a first baseman who I think, for all intents and purposes, is a good hitter, but he doesn't have like he doesn't have that power bat. We're hoping we can see that from Cruz this year, but you're going to need more than that. And I think Jack Sawinski or a Heston Kjerstad. But the problem is, even with the Kjerstad piece, like I just don't want to see these top 3 guys go. I don't want to see him go. I want to see what it looks like eventually when you have Bubba Chandler in with them, whether that's opening day or whether that's a month or 2 down the line. I want to see what that looks like to say these are our 4, and then battle that out for the 5th spot, whether it's Falter or Oviedo or obviously not Ortiz anymore. But does Mike Burrows take a big step? I mean, I liked what I've seen from Mike Burrows. I think he's overlooked a lot, and I think there's some people starting to say that and starting to recognize that too. You're going to start hearing his name more often as we get closer to spring training. Kjerstad, higher ceiling. Abreu has a higher floor. It's basically what value. That's a good point. I think that ceiling is probably what you're aiming for, and when you're dealing with trades, sometimes you have to do that. So it makes it difficult. But to be honest with you, I thought Ortiz was the ticket. I thought packaging Ortiz with maybe like a Xander Meath and something like that, something a little bit higher. Package Ortiz in to go to Boston, and I thought that would have been a good fit. We've heard before that Boston likes Ortiz. That should have been the place he got traded, and Abreu could have been coming back in that deal. I thought that was a good lineup. I thought you could have mixed and matched and come up with something a little bit creative by putting some big time, some big arms that are further away, younger guys like Michael Kennedy and Xander Meath. Can you imagine those 2 guys with Ortiz going to Boston and getting Abreu and maybe, something else? I think would have been really interesting. But I feel like that ship has sailed. I mean, I as soon as I saw the Ortiz trade, I tweeted, "We're done." And I said this on Thursday. The intent of that is that's it. Like, we're not getting another big player via trade because I just don't see them. I definitely don't see them parting with Jones or Keller. I don't see them parting with Chandler or Harrington. And then you've got 2 guys on the 40-man roster in Ashcraft and Burrows who look to be a part of the team this season. I don't know that I'm parting with those guys quite yet. Not until I know more about Oviedo, unless Oviedo's one of them. You could deal Oviedo because then you don't have to worry about his timeline. I've heard right out of the gate, I've heard May. I don't know why I've heard 2 different numbers. Maybe one of them's better than the other and more accurate. I'm off the top of my head, I just don't remember. Dave White says he would trade Burrows. And that, to me, that's value too. I really think, though, that the value of Burrows is probably not understood quite yet. Give it some time, let him pitch a little bit, and I think that value actually will go up. I thought we traded Ortiz probably at it's possibly at his highest value. And I thought that was an aggressive move, and we talked about it here the whole time. I thought he was gone. So I don't know. Well, I think the Red Sox, Mutu says the problem is I don't know if the Red Sox still want pitching after getting Crochet. I think they still do. I think they're still talking about it. However, it would probably be in their best interest to do it via free agency, just because they could add without losing more guys. And I think once you do that, once you start moving into some of those different spots, start moving some of your prospects, and then you're trying to make your team better without really emptying the tank, free agency has to be the way to do it. Mike asks if Ashcraft would be enough for Abreu. I'm not sure, but could you imagine like Ashcraft? And again, I'm going to bring up Xander Meath because I think a lot of people really like him, but he is also like 19 or 20 years old. And I always think of like, if you trade those guys that are that young, specifically pitching, you have more time to basically get that player back in the draft. So if maybe next year you draft a guy out of college who's already 20 and he's really good, then you've already kind of supplemented that trade right back. You know, I think you would have to throw in somebody like Xander Meath or something like that to give them a little icing on the cake. The problem is this team doesn't have any bats to trade. They don't want to trade Termarr Johnson, and that's about all you got. So there's not a whole lot of bats here to trade, and at some point, I think the Pirates are going to have to figure out how to get some bats in the system. So, and how much longer are you waiting? I mean, there's not really anybody to trade right now. You need to go maybe sign, like I said, a Jock Peterson, 2 or 3 years. And then if you start to have somebody else emerge, like let's say Jack Sawinski emerges and you believe that he can be the guy, then now you deal Jock Peterson in the offseason and just try to bolster some young hitters in a way. And it's not going to be like a lot. It's not going to be crazy, but you know what I mean? It's just a situation that you could get yourself into with a Max Kepler or even a Randall Grichuk if he has a great year. And like I said, and Billy Cook seems to be like getting better and better, and we really like it, or Nick York or one of these guys that could possibly play corner outfield. Then you could take that and say, all right, let's trade these veterans that are under, you know, a little bit of a deal here and maybe try to get some hitters in the system. Because these hitters are not just guys that you think are going to come and make an impact, but geez, maybe just to trade. You need more trade pieces. So you get guys so you can trade guys. I don't know. Kind of interesting. Dave says some of the free agents might have to lower their asking price by spring training if they're still available, though. How many impact players are still going to be sitting out there if you sit around and wait for spring training? And that's our beef right now, is there's not 3 months left in the off season or 2.5 months or whatever it is. Like, you got to act. You got to get it. You got to go out on December 24th and trade Josh Bell. Only the opposite. I know if you guys remember the Josh Bell trade on Christmas Eve back in 2020, but are we kind of setting ourselves up for something like that right now? Pirates are quiet. They're getting young players with options, basically Indianapolis depth, right? Which is good. They need to get those things too, especially when you give up guys that nobody's heard of. But where, yeah, I mean, Bucko Mike says Ashcraft is a pen arm. Meath throws 96 at 19. I mean, it is ridiculous. He's a good prospect. Xander Meath is a dude. Which is why I'm saying maybe now's the time to move on that. Pit City What says, no reason they can't afford a decent outfield. 100%. Like I said, they've got money they have to spend. Not just money they could spend, but they have to spend. So I think, like I said, a Max Kepler, a Jock Peterson, give them 3 years. Just make sure there's no trade clauses in there, like no trade clauses in there. So you could trade them if you need to. If you get some of our guys that are already here, controllable or something like that, you can make a move somehow. But platooning right field is not a big deal, especially if you're looking right now at first base. For starters, at first base being an everyday guy, you've got an everyday guy at every position except for right field. Catcher doesn't count. No catchers are every day. You understand. But if you look at right field and say, we're going to come up with a platoon option, I can't think. If you go, let's say, like I said, the guys that we've brought up right now, and there are more guys, there are more options in this. But if you had Grichuk and Peterson out there, or Grichuk and Kepler out there, I think we'd all be pretty excited about the potential of right fielders, of those two guys combining for 25 home runs. I mean, gotta like that. If it's Peterson over Kepler, maybe 30. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing that you're getting those guys. It doesn't have to be. The thing is if you can get guys that are not the, like, okay, so we don't go after Santander. I get that. So we don't go after, I mean, we've already lost O'Neill. We've already lost Conforto, right? So you don't get a guy like that. But if you could get two guys out there that are good on their platoon advantages. I mean, you could essentially get the same production for maybe close to the same money, probably a little bit more. But that stat that Bucko Mike put up here earlier about Grichuk, I mean, he's saying I like him, the RBI potential. I mean, you're talking about, if I could find that again, the comment that you made about runners in scoring position. I think it's gone now. I have a thing where, like, if somebody removes stuff, it like removes a ton of stuff. I'm trying to work on that. But either way, right here, Grichuk, 324 with runners in scoring position. You talk about an offensive need for this team is runners in scoring position production. I mean, essentially, let's look at our list of guys who were good with runners in scoring position last year. I think it's like Nick Gonzalez, and that's it. I mean, if Nick Gonzalez is your only guy that's good, and he was legitimately good, but Nick Gonzalez, and then you can add somebody else who's good with runners in scoring position. I think that Spencer Horwitz is going to be important for that type of thing because of the fact that he's good with bat to ball, putting the ball in play. He doesn't strike out a lot. I think that kind of a guy in this lineup is going to be very good for the runners in scoring position. I think Brian Reynolds is probably still going to be fine with runners in scoring position. Maybe a chance of him doing too much might have been something, but that's an area that this team needs to improve on, just like they need to improve against right-handed pitching. Horwitz is the beginning of that. I still think, well, Cruz is part of that as well, because I think he's going to take another step. But I think part of that as well is getting the right field to be a platoon situation. Because, like I said, you've got money to spend. You've got money you have to spend. Be aggressive and go after these guys. We need to take a look a little bit at who else is available out there, because I'm sure it's more than these three guys that we've been talking about, or four guys if you want to bring up Marte. I assume Marte still crushes lefties despite the decline of some of his talent. I just don't know if that's the place you want to go. I think the Mets would probably just hold on to him. Bucko Mike says Horwitz, 268 runners in scoring position. That's good. I mean, it's not 324, but that's still good. Anytime you can get there, I mean, especially if you start looking at 2 out. Well, there you go. 276 runners in scoring position, 2 outs. It's hilarious that you put that in there right after, because that's a big deal. And I just, last year we saw how many times this team struck out. Back-to-back strikeouts with runners in scoring position. If Horwitz is in that, you have a less chance of that happening. Specifically with a right-hander up there. So we can talk all day about the Pirates and about all these possibilities. We're probably going to start repeating ourselves here in a minute. Bullpen arms are another place that they can spend money, and we know that they need help in the bullpen. Jeff Hoffman is the first guy that always comes to my mind. He was a guy going into the offseason that I wanted to target. And there's been a couple chats here from Bucko Mike. He likes him. He gets the Chapman contract. He probably does. He's probably going to get around $11 million. And I think the Pirates should pay it, even if it's for 3 years. This bullpen could still be a strength. If you can get bounced back from Holderman and Majinski and Bednar, and I think there's a fair chance you get that, and you can get Kyle Nicholas to take another step forward, and I think there's a very good chance that happens. If you add one more righty to that, and maybe even Dowry Moretta being a part of this team, this bullpen, as we're talking, maybe Ashcraft at some point, Burrows, anybody who doesn't make the starting rotation, if you can keep a couple stretched out and have another one up here if you need it, I don't think you need it if you go get a Jeff Hoffman. Because a Jeff Hoffman is going to be, okay, now we don't have to go get a Tanner Scott as far as our lefties, right? Because he's hot. But you don't have to go get him. If you get him, you might not need Jeff Hoffman. But for me, I know that Hoffman's been getting some interest as a starter. But I think if he's coming here, and I think maybe that's the holdup. If they are in on Hoffman, maybe that's a holdup. Maybe it's something to say like, well, he wants to start. He's gonna look at his options that way. If not, we'll continue these talks and see what we can work out. But I'd love to see something aggressive in the bullpen makes a big difference as well. If you get a guy like Jeff Hoffman and you add 2 more lefties and not try to go into it with what they've got going on right now. Just making sure I got everything moving here. Sorry. Taking a double check. I don't know why it takes me so long to make sure everything's working. But that's what we're doing here. Let's take a look around the division a little bit because there were 2 big trades happening from guys in the division. And I guess we'll start with the Brewers. The Brewers just won the division. Willy Adames is gone. But if you remember back a year ago, the Corbin Burnes trade brought Joey Ortiz in. He played third for them last year. He's just going to move to short. I don't think it'll be Terang. I think it'll be Joey Ortiz. That guy's so slick with the glove that even if he doesn't hit, he's valuable. And so now they're trading Devin Williams, which these are 2 guys that I honestly thought would be on their way out last year, which is why I didn't pick them to win the division. Because I thought they were on their way out. But they didn't. They kept them. They won the division. They tried to go make a run for it. Smart, because they can still go out and well, not Adames. He's gone. And Devin Williams was hurt for a lot of last year, so his value is probably down. Came back, was great. Absolutely no problem there. And they end up trading him to the Yankees. They got Nestor Cortez, and they got an infield prospect named Caleb Durbin, who's already on the 40-man. Caleb Durbin's a second baseman. He also has played some third. So him or Bryce Terang, you can figure that out. I'm not surprised if this guy gets plugged in right away with Joey Ortiz moving to shortstop. That outfield is what they are. How far back does this team go? Who's the pitcher that was in their bullpen this year who sat in for Devin Williams for a long time while he was hurt? You talk about a way to be like, well, this is easy. We can trade Devin Williams now. We can trade Devin Williams. We can replace Willy Adames. Not that this dude's going to replace Willy Adames right away, but they've got guys that they can still go out there and they can compete, and who knows what else they do. And they get Nestor Cortez. I don't really know how much value Nestor Cortez has, but it seems like he's I don't know. I don't understand the Nestor Cortez piece. Maybe they figure something out. But either way, Willy Adames now in San Francisco and Devin Williams now with the Yankees. I mean, you're starting to see some guys away from our division that's better. Okay, that's good. But they're not like dumb trades. Seem like they're smart trades. And Milwaukee's been doing this for a long time. Just like I said, Corbin Burnes to Joey Ortiz. He wasn't the only guy they got in that. So I don't know. Brewers probably aren't going anywhere. They're too young. They're still going to be a pretty good team. I think Willy Adames is a huge one, but I mean, you got to like what a lot of things about their lineup already, or their pitching staff or whatever. Their bullpen's still going to be solid. So they're not going anywhere. And then you look at the Cubs went out. The Cubs went out and got, oh my gosh, Kyle Tucker. Couldn't think of his name. They went out and got Kyle Tucker. Now they did send Isaac Paredes, but who, by the way, will mash in Houston. I think that's pretty known around there. But they get Cam Smith, who's a third baseman prospect. They get Hayden Wesneski. And Houston kind of stocks up on a couple things. But now the Cubs have Kyle Tucker. The question is now, will they move Bellinger? I'd like to see it. At this point, I'd like to see it. If we're going to have a right-handed heavy starting rotation and you're going to have to go up against Bellinger and Ian Happ and Kyle Tucker every time we play the Cubs, I don't really like that. I don't like that at all. But you see teams in your division making moves and doing different things. And you just like, hey, I like where the Pirates are, man. I think they're going to be okay. And then you see the moves that other teams are making and you're like, crap. Because that you just start to feel like you're getting passed up. I mean, the Reds are going to do it. Francona is a huge upgrade. And I'm going to say not only because he's a great manager, but because they're coming from probably the worst manager in baseball. And then they get a great manager. How long do you think it takes before he moves Ellie to the outfield? It's going to be my thing. He might not. He might just get the best out of Ellie. I don't like the India trade for them. I don't like India for Singer, personally. I like that way more for Kansas City. Way more. But they've got a lot of prospects in the infield, so maybe it's there. Bucko Mike says players love to play for Tito. Absolutely. So I don't know. We're gonna keep looking. I don't understand the Cubs quite yet. I mean, this is a team that could spend a lot. And I felt like last year they were just a team that kind of relied on the new manager to carry it. And they just weren't as good as what they wanted to be. What they thought they were. They weren't as good as, I had them winning the division. They certainly weren't as good as I thought they were going to be. But the Brewers will get a starter. They're going to get somebody else. Jack Flaherty's not signed yet. I don't know if that's in the play for them. I think he's probably going to be outpricing the Brewers a little bit. But they'll somehow come in with some sneaky pick, or they've got a guy coming up that we just don't know about yet. I'd hate to pitch there. I feel like it's easy to hit there. Anyway, Brewers aren't going anywhere. Reds are looking like they're better. The Cubs just got Kyle Tucker, which is, where do you guys rate Kyle Tucker? He's certainly a top 10 player, right? At least hitter. Don't you think? I gotta feel like he is. He's got to be, that dude is underrated. Very, very good. Oh, gee, that's a good point. I didn't realize that. He says the Cubs were into the luxury tax last season. It was just a lot of guys underperforming their contracts. I know Bellinger's was a lot, but who else did they have? He also says Tucker is a top 10 player all around. Yeah, all 5 tools. He's a very good player. And now we're going to have to face him. And I don't know if the Cubs, from what I read, that there wasn't an extension in the works. And there wasn't, that wasn't something they were thinking about. Hot take, Dave White. He'd rather have Tucker than Juan Soto. Better all around, as far as all the tools, right? Better all around. I will agree that there's nobody that commands the zone quite like Soto. And there's nobody that kind of has those, has those type of at-bats. It really isn't. And he's just getting to the age where he's going to start adding more power. So I know that some guys are ahead of others and that might not be the case, but if he follows the same path, he's just into the same age where into that age where he's going to start adding power. So, he could be still better. The guy's incredible, but yeah, he's a DH. And Tucker's not. He's a good player. He's a great player, right? He's a top 10 player. And now he plays for the Cubs. I don't know how he's going to like hitting there at Wrigley. But like I said, what do we got here? Cortez at Yankee Stadium last year, 5-5, 3.11 ERA. A lefty can have that kind of effect at Yankee Stadium. But that's a really good sign because Yankee Stadium's certainly a hitter's ballpark. So, maybe I'm underselling Nasty Nestor a little bit. I just felt like they didn't talk about him a lot. Felt like he was way up there, and then last year kind of under the radar with everybody else they had with Luis Hill and Garrett Cole and what's his name that they brought in, the other lefty. Your division continues to get better, and you're not yet. And they're moving, and you feel like we got plenty of time. Sometimes that gets frustrating for me. It gets very frustrating for me. So here we are on Ben time. We'll see if we can get a move at some point. I think anything between now and Christmas. Anything between now and Christmas would be like, all right, that's really good. I love that. I mean, if we actually love it. Because if you pair Horwitz with another move, I think it starts to make that move look even better. Like, all right, let's do it. And I think it's going to have to come free agency for me. But I don't know. We'll see. See what they come up with. I personally, I hope they can keep the top three in place. And I hope they can keep Chandler and Harrington in place. Those are my guys. I want to see all five of them in a rotation. That's really what I want to see. Now, that's my personal thing. Hoffman and Kutch are the two moves soon, says Bucko Mike. Dude, I'm actually there. I think if they could make those two moves, I think those are, Kutch I think is inevitable. So as much as I'm not like moved by that, I'm also kind of at the place where I'm like, yeah, but just get it done just to show movement. I think Hoffman's a big deal. I think you got to get him. Listen, I'm a believer that Bednar's going to be fine, but in case he's not, you got to have somebody. And that somebody can't be Kyle Nicholas. Dave White says, I want to see those five plus Harrington make it a 6-man rotation. Well, Harrington's one of the five I was talking about. I want Skeens, Keller, Jones, Chandler, Harrington as my five. I know they're all right-handed. I don't care. The 6-man rotation is really interesting to me. And we've got about 10 minutes here. I don't know if I want to necessarily go down that path, but a 6-man rotation is really interesting to me. I don't like it for guys like Mitch Keller, but when you start saying that Jones and Harrington are in the rotation, or even Burrows or Ashcraft or even Oviedo, who's coming off of a surgery year, when you start talking about all those guys, it's like, yeah, I could really see the 6-man being effective, maybe skipping that last one every once in a while in a like, if there's a day off, skip it and maybe just do a piggyback just to try to keep it moving. But if you have consecutive games, boom, 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 then I can see, running a 6-man and letting, let's say, for instance, Bubba Chandler makes the roster and you've still got Bailey Falter in the mix and those are your five. Let's say you add one. Let's say you add Burrows. If you've got 11 straight games, Burrows gets a start. If not, Burrows just piggybacks off a Chandler's start. Whenever he's done, Burrows comes in and pitches the rest of the game, right? So long as they're effective, obviously. But you could do something like that where you have and you don't even pitch him out of the bullpen unless you haven't used him. Well, you would use him though. You would use him every time. Every time Chandler's pitching, you would put, I'm just using Burrows as an example, you would put Burrows in, and if it's 3 innings, if it's 4 innings, if it's 5 innings, it's his game unless he needs to come out. And then he doesn't pitch out of the bullpen otherwise. And then if you need him, like if you've got that run of 11 or 13 straight games, which I don't know how many times it's going to happen, I haven't looked that close at the schedule. But if you've got a run like that, you just give him his own start and use the bullpen as you would anyway. And you get that extra day off for everybody else in a run like that. And then when you have days off built in, you don't give them another day off. That's the problem with the 6-man rotation. I like the 5 rest days. I don't like 6 rest days. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's something that's, I'm looking at. I don't know if they'll do it. And I don't know if, like, why wouldn't you want Skeens and Keller going with 4 rest days? Like, that's the question. Like, why wouldn't you want that? Why would you want Skeens for 29 starts instead of 33 or something like that, right? Why wouldn't you do that? And that's the thing that makes it hard. Who gets opening day, guys? Who gets opening day and who gets the home opener? And is it the same guy? It's not the same guy. We've got 7 games on the road before we come home, I believe. So who gets which game? And do they line it up so that you can have Skeens and Keller get those 2 games intentionally? Because if you just go 1 and 2 with Skeens and Keller, then they're going to throw the last 2 games in Tampa. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you want that. So maybe early on, maybe you stretch them out a little bit. Maybe that's where you can give some guys some extra starts. Maybe you use Skeens on opening day. You go through your 5. He throws again, but Keller doesn't, and Keller gets home opener. I feel like that'd be silly, right? Do you give Keller opening day 1 more year? I mean, you can't. I mean, they care about that kind of thing. Man, I almost feel like you give, I don't know, it is kind of 1A, 1B when you talk about the first game of the season, the opening day game, and then also the home opener game. So I think if you're a pitcher, there's nothing real like official about it, but what would you rather have? Would you rather have that home opener or opening day? Now, obviously, if they land on the same day, you only got 1. But they don't for the Pirates. Most of the time, they don't. We don't get opening day very often. At least it feels like that. So, I don't know, guys, but I know we're nearing the end here. I'm going to play some music and get out of here. These are the days that I feel like you guys are carrying the show. Because when there's nothing going on, we're basically just riffing. And when I have to come on here solo, I rely on you guys. I appreciate you guys being in the chat and being active. It's really, really helpful. Maybe the Pirates make a move this week. Gosh, I hope so, right? Let's get, not just to give us something to talk about, but so we can get something else. Need to get some more cards, man. Get a little rush out of that. Jared Jones card. So, all right, guys. Appreciate you. Thanks again. Click that subscribe button. Make sure that the next time I'm live, you guys know about it. Let's go, Bucks.
Thanks for listening to my dad and Uncle Jake on the Bridge to Buctober podcast. Follow them on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Bridge2Buctober. Don't forget to subscribe so you know when new episodes are released. Clear the deck, cannonball coming, and let's go Bucks!